Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Yeah, we should be live on Facebook and YouTube now. We're telling you, yes, people are joining. That's awesome. Hello. This is pretty exciting. Hello, welcome to the book launch of Epically Good Greek Myths, my latest book. It's really exciting to do this. Like normally when I do a book launch, I rent a theatre or I go to a bookstore and, it's a lot of organisation because I live in a country town. So I have to travel to that place and drag my children and they have to miss sport or something. And it's all a thing. And sometimes I have to put down a big deposit and all that stuff. So it's really nice well for me to be able to stay here at home, and I'm pretty excited to be able to have a book launch where everyone can come everywhere in the world, and because it's great, you can all join me live. Someone's just said hello from Brisbane, Redman. It's really exciting. So, and also I'll be able to record it and put it on the podcast so thousands of people around the world can listen as well. Thousands of people around the world could be watching right now live. It's a very exciting way to do a book launch. This is normally if you ever come to one of my live book launches, I usually, because when you're at the start, hello from Canada. Hello, Molly. That's exciting. I was in Canada. When was I in Canada? Not that long ago, like April last year. And it's so beautiful. It's actually a lot like Australia. People there have the same sort of laid back attitude, which is pretty cool. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, if you come to any of my live events, usually what I do at the beginning, hello, Feline from Melbourne. I've got to stop saying hello to you and get on with the book launch, but hello. Usually I start off when everyone's just arriving and because people turn up a bit late. They don't want to miss the good stuff when I'm reading and, revealing secrets. So usually at the beginning, what I do is I ask the audience a bunch of questions and then I throw candy at them if they get them right. I also throw candy if they get the answers wrong. But I can't do that because you're online and you can't throw candy through the internet. So if you do have any candy with you, feel free to throw it at your own head right now. All right, everyone's pouring on now. It's wonderful to see you all. It's so, so good. So I should talk about the book because that's really what everyone wants me to talk about. My publisher would like me to talk about it. So the first thing I always do at a book launch is I hold up my book lots of times and then I say, how did I come to write this book? Because that's really the story I'm telling you here today. So this book, now some of the people tuning in will be fans of my books and some of them will be fans of the podcast. Now, if you are a fan of the podcast, Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, you will know all about this book already because all the stories in this book have already been done on the podcast. So you think, why should I buy the book? Well, it's a great souvenir of all the, you get to see it written down. You can read it yourself at any time. But there are extra bits. At the end of every story, there's also a fun fact. Because when I'm researching them, I learn all these really cool things. I thought it'd be great to be able to put that in for you. Also, when they make me write it down, they make me fix up all the errors. Because the podcast is just me by the seat of my pants writing these stories and often to really tight deadlines. So I'm just focused on telling a great story, but when Penguin gets hold of it, they do make me fix the grammar and get some of the details closer to the truth. Although I always say, when your stories are being told by a flying talking pig, what does truth really matter anyway? Anyway, so how did I come to write this? Well, it's all from the podcast, really. The podcast I started doing, it's actually, I've been so busy the last 18 months. I can't keep track of all the milestones. And actually around now is a huge milestone because it's around now is I'm not even sure the exact date, but it's just about, I think in the next week, the 5th anniversary of me doing Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt. It started right back just like at the beginning in March 2020, and like COVID hit within like a fortnight of me starting the podcast. And so the podcast took off because everyone was locked in their houses. And when I started doing the podcast, I thought, I'll only do, I had about 10 stories already written. So I thought I'll do those. I'll do some Nanny Piggin stories. I'll write a few more stories. The podcast will go for like 6 months. I'll do 26 episodes. It'll be fun. I'd never recorded audio recording before. So I thought that'd be a really fun thing for me to do. Very different, because until that point in my career, so like I've been a writer for 27 years. So the first 22 years of my career, I spent 10 years as a television writer. And then I started writing books. And then I was doing both at the same time for about 5, 6, 7 years. And then I've just been writing books. So it's been a very silent world here in my office for those like first 22 years. And then I really wanted to do an audiobook, and Penguin weren't keen. They wouldn't let me, basically. So I thought, I've been a writer for 22 years and I was looking to change things up and do something different. And I thought I really love telling stories out loud when I go out and do presentations at schools and things. So I thought I'll just do a podcast and I'll tell a story once a week. So that's what I did. I had all these, the first episodes of the podcast of stories I just had that I'd written over the years. And then I did some Nanny Piggin stuff. And then I thought I can write some more. And so I started off with like Nanny Piggin's versions of classic fairy tales. And I was doing the Tall Tales with Tammy and Mum, which is obviously I'm Mum, and my younger daughter Tammy was based on her. And, I started to run out of fairy tales that everyone knew. So then I had to research fairy tales that people didn't know so well. And then I started sort of like branch out. I did some historical things like George Washington, and did I do Marie Curie? Anyway, I did a bunch of different history. I did some Shakespeare stories. And then I did all the pesky kids stories because they didn't want to make those into audiobooks at all. So I said, I'll just do all of those on the podcast. And then I started to reach around for more folk tales, and I started doing Greek myths. So I was still doing fairy tales. I was still doing Greek myths. I was still doing Nanny Piggin stories from the books, and I was occasionally Friday Barnes stories from the books. But the Greek myths became really, really popular. The publishers eventually got on board with the whole podcast thing, and they started publishing books of the podcast. So they published Shockingly Good Stories, Astonishingly Good Stories, and then the big one, Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt. And there were Greek myths and all of those. But they came to me and said, kids love Greek myths. And I'm like, no kidding. They're so crazy violent, and the stuff that happens is insane. They're really good fun. And they said, well, why don't you just do a collection of Greek myths? I'm like, yeah, I can totally do that. So I got the most recent Greek myths I'd done on the podcast. I started focusing more on Greek myths in the podcast, and I did all the stories of Jason and his quest to get the golden fleece, and I did a few other ones, and they collected them and made them into this book. And then they got this illustrator. Her name is Lucinda Gifford, and normally she does... I'm just a bit worried because the computer might not do justice to how beautiful these colors are, but these are really beautiful colors, and it's sort of... Yeah, it's a really beautiful book when you see it physically in a store, because Lucinda Gifford is an incredible artist. She normally does like picture books, and, I'm so grateful that Penguin hooked me up with such a great artist to work with. It's just made it so beautiful. So that is how this book came to be. It's like a byproduct of the podcast, and just my love of Greek mythology. Because when I was growing up, I went to a regular state school. My parents... they had fairly, they grew up in rural England. They went to regular state schools too. We didn't grow up with knowing a lot of Greek mythology. I never studied ancient history. I never studied the classics at school. My mum, I've actually got her copy here, I think. Yeah, my mum, when I was a kid, read me a couple of stories from this book, this very old book, which is Tales of the Greek Heroes by Walsh. It's his translation. And she particularly loved... My mum has this weird sort of... Like people say, oh, kids love Greek myths. And I personally think the crazy violence is part of it, because most books these days are very, very sanitized, particularly children's books. And some of the stuff in the stories, and my mum, that stuff really appealed to her. She was a primary school teacher, and she loved the story of Theseus, on his journey. Like I do it on the podcast, where he's traveling to meet his father, and on the road to his father's palace, he goes past like all these 6 different entrances to the underworld, and there's all these evil people at the entrances, and one of them is the blacksmith who gets people to lie in his bed, and if they're too tall for the bed, he chops their feet off, and if they're too short for the bed, he stretches them. So my mum, for some reason, loved that story, so she read me that story from that book when I was a kid. But generally, I didn't know a lot about Greek mythology because I grew up pre-Percy Jackson and all that, whereas your generation, people who read my books, you're actually really familiar with Greek mythology. It's actually incredibly impressive. For someone of my generation, I'm 49, people our age, we grew up when there were, in Australia, 4 television channels. And every Friday night, there would be a movie on television and everyone would watch it. And they would have Sunday night movies and everyone would watch it. And you'd go to school on Monday and you'd all watch the movie the night before. And if you were sick home from school, they would have midday movies like old Westerns on the TV. So it meant that everyone watched the same TV shows pretty much, and they watched the same movies. So everyone had all this stuff they had in common. I can't remember where I'm going with that. Oh, yeah. So, but today, kids, they can read anything, like all this stuff that you've got access to that we didn't, like manga, the cartoons from the graphic novels from Japan. My daughter reads Korean fiction, and it's so much on the internet. There's all this stuff from all around the world. So kids can go down whatever rabbit hole they want, whatever their area of interest is. There's not like one thing that everyone watches and has in common. So when I go and do presentations at schools, it's really hard for me, say I'm trying to explain story structure, to say, well, what one movie has everyone seen? Like, it's very hard to find one movie every single kid in the group has seen. Whereas in my day, everyone had seen Star Wars, Grease, Sound of Music, because it was just on every year on TV. But it's really interesting. Like if I say to a group of kids, tell me who Luke Skywalker is, a whole heap of kids won't know. And even like Harry Potter, like if you say, tell me who Voldemort is, there'll be kids that have never read it. There'll be kids that have never seen the book. But if I do a presentation and I say, who here knows who Medusa is and can tell me the 2 most significant facts about why she was dangerous, every kid knows. And you think, that's amazing. They know that she had snakes for hair, and they know that her glare could turn kids into stone. Like, I've never met a group of kids, doesn't matter socioeconomics or where they are in the world. I did an author talk in Singapore, all the kids knew, and doesn't matter how wealthy the kids are, where they are. If you get up in front of a group of 100 kids, they will, between them, know who Medusa is, and that she had snakes for hair, and that she could turn you to stone with her glares. That's how powerful Greek myths are, that everyone knows about them. All these, just 2,500 years since the Greek Empire. And these are stories that predate the Greek Empire by 1,000 or 2,000 years. So it's amazing the power of these stories. So when I started to put this book together, my publishers got excited, kids got excited, Lucinda Gifford got excited. So that is how this book came to be. All right. So this is the traditional first part of a book launch, where I just glanced across at the comments and someone has said, party cannon. They've obviously been to one of my book launches. I always launch a party cannon at the end. Rest assured, there is a party cannon. I actually have it here. It's the biggest party cannon I've ever bought. It's 75 centimeters. So that's like 2.5 feet long. And the reason I have it is because I bought this for the Canberra Christmas show I did last year. And they freaked out because they thought they didn't want me to let off a confetti cannon. And to be fair, it's the biggest one that I've ever bought. And it's supposed to shoot 8 meters in the sky, the confetti. And when you perform at a theater, all the lights are about 6 meters above your head. And so they were rightfully concerned that if I fired a cannon full of all these wispy bits of paper up, it would go into the lights and catch fire because the lights are so hot. So I had to go and buy some that were half the size. But as a result, I've got these 5 enormous confetti cannons that I have not been able to use anywhere because the theatres don't like it if I set fire to them. So I thought I might let one of those off at the end. So rest assured there will be. Oh, I did do Marie Curie. Thank you for letting me know. Maeve. All right. Okay, now I'm getting sidetracked. I have such a digressive mind. I can just sidetrack all day, but I better do the things that you're meant to do at a book launch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you from the book, and then I am going to answer some people sent through questions, and then we'll do the confetti cannon. All right. So let's get into it. This is what it's all about. All right. So the book is Epically Good Greek Myths, and I will read you the introduction first. That's the dedication page. This is really exciting. I've never opened it physically as a book and read it myself before. It's very weird when you write a book and it all just comes out of your brain to then see it as a physical object. It's crazy. Anyway, so here we are, launching it. This book is dedicated to all the children who secretly dream of time travel. Unfortunately, time machines don't exist in the real world yet. But books do, and books allow us to travel through time and space, beyond reality, and away into all the realms of impossibility. The stories in this book are retellings of ancient Greek myths that were written thousands of years ago. But even the ancient Greek storytellers who wrote these tales were time travelers because they were telling stories about Zeus and Hera, and Theseus and Hercules, versions of which had circulated for thousands of years before them. People have always wanted to travel to the most amazing places they can imagine, even places that don't exist anymore. Now with this book, you can too, and with the world's most glamorous flying pig as your tour guide. Yeah, well, there you go. That's the introduction. Oh, and I am going to read to you. I thought I'd read the first story from the Golden Fleece set of stories, because there's several chapters, obviously, about Jason and his quest to find the Golden Fleece, or sheet cake, as it ends up being what he's going for. I should have explained about Nanny Piggins. Anyway, Nanny Piggins is the world's most glamorous flying pig. And I discovered very early on in the podcast, the first couple of episodes of the podcast, there's some where there's a grandmother figure telling the stories. And then I just swapped to Nanny Piggins at some stage. And I pretty much increasingly stick with Nanny Piggins telling the stories, because I just find Nanny Piggins, the way she talks and thinks, is basically the way I think. But if I spoke like that in real life, I'd get in a lot of trouble. And I just find the stories are much more fun when she is narrating them, because she has such an interesting worldview, and she can say outrageous things that I would get cancelled for if I said them. And she's just a lot of fun. She's so much fun. And I love having her voice in my head. So I love having that voice to share with you. So anyway, I'm going to read you The Golden Fleece as told by Nanny Piggins. Nanny Piggins, can you please tell us the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece? Asked Michael. No, said Nanny Piggins. No, asked Michael. Nanny Piggins did not often reject an opportunity to tell a story. She believed stories to be highly educational, fictional ones much more so than non-fiction, because non-fiction was often more fictional than you realised, so you could end up knowing less than you thought you did. Whereas fiction was sometimes this, by the way, is something you're going to discover. The podcast is very edited. I slip up a lot, particularly on pronunciations of Greek names. So I edit that as much as possible. I'm not going to be able to do that with this reading. So you're going to see how much I stuff up in real life. Okay, let's pick that up again. Because non-fiction was often more fictional than you realised, so you could end up knowing less than you thought you did. Whereas fiction was sometimes more non-fictional than you realised, so you often ended up knowing more. Or should that be the other way around? Whereas fiction was often more non-fictional than you realised, so often ended up knowing less. Yeah, that should be the other way around. Sometimes we have errors in these books. And she took her job as a nanny seriously, so she told her stories all the time. No, said Nanny Piggins, and by no, of course, I mean yes. Phew, said Michael. I will eventually tell you the story of Jason and the Golden Fleece, because the official ancient Greek version of the story is outrageously inaccurate. It so often is, said Derek. They were yet to discover an ancient Greek myth that Nanny Piggins didn't know for a fact to be significantly untrue. But to tell you the story of Jason, I must first tell you the backstory of the Golden Fleece, explained Nanny Piggins, because the story of Jason is a fabulous epic tale across multiple locations involving dozens of different monsters, gods, and natural disasters. But the story of his journey to get the Golden Fleece doesn't make any sense if you don't appreciate what the Golden Fleece is. I hadn't thought about it that way, said Derek. The Argonauts who sailed with Jason were 50 of the greatest heroes in all of the ancient Greek story days. So the question is, what was so great about this fleece that they were all prepared to get on a boat together, risking their lives to get it? I don't know, admitted Michael. Exactly, said Nanny Piggins. So I will tell you that story first. And as is so often the way, the story begins with dreadful parenting. Specifically, it started with Zeus. Ugh, not him again, said Samantha. As we know, Zeus, in his role as king of the gods, had some really strange ideas about how to run the world. Now, Zeus had this friend called Ixion. He was half god, the son of... He was a half god, the son of Ares, possibly. He was also the king of the Lapiths, Anyway, Ixion got into trouble because Ixion got into trouble because he'd just gotten married, and he got into an argument with his father-in-law about how many horses he would give in exchange for his wife. He traded horses for his wife? Asked Samantha. No, that wasn't the problem, said Nanny Piggins. Ixion refused to trade horses for his wife. Because he was a feminist and he thought women should not be bought and sold? Asked Derek. Oh no, said Nanny Piggins, because he really liked his horses and he didn't want to give them away. He wanted to keep his wife and his horses, which was not the done thing in the ancient Greek story days. It was considered very rude. So his father-in-law stole his horses, and Ixion retaliated by killing his father-in-law, which made everyone really, really cross. Understandably so, said Derek. Murder is always very naughty. Plus, Ixion had also been dishonourable. He really should have given over the horses. So he had committed a dishonourable murder, and the ancient Greeks thought that was the worst naughtiness of all. Everyone was cross. No one in his kingdom would forgive Ixion, so Zeus felt sorry for him. Zeus felt sorry for him? Asked Michael. Yes, Zeus could probably relate to the whole everyone being enraged by your terrible behaviour thing, as he got into the same type of scrape all the time. So he invited Ixion to come and live with him on Mount Olympus. What? Exclaimed Derek. You mean Ixion went up to Mount Olympus and slept on Zeus's sofa? Basically, yes, said Nanny Piggins. But it did not go well. What a shocker, said Samantha sarcastically. You've got to understand, the gods all lived together on Mount Olympus, just like one big reality TV show, and it was a very tempestuous reality TV show. As you know, all the gods had incredibly dangerous godly powers and incredibly short fuses. They were all taking offence over everything all the time because they all behaved in an offensive way. It was a constant recipe for rolling disaster. Also, the gods were very good looking, like supermodels and movie stars, only better because they were gods, so they glowed, and could fly and turn into anything they liked. So Ixion was hanging out with his friend Zeus when dinner time rolled around. Gods love to feast, so they went down to the dining room to eat. All the other gods were sitting around the table, and Ixion saw, for the first time, Hera, the goddess of women, and also Zeus's wife. Ixion fell in lust at first sight. Don't you mean love at first sight? Asked Michael. No, I don't, said Nanny Piggins. I don't think Ixion was capable of that level of sophisticated emotion. His eyes goggled, his mouth hung open, his pulse raced. He couldn't stop staring at her, and this made Zeus very angry. But Zeus was horrible to Hera, said Samantha. Yes, Zeus was a complicated man, agreed Nanny Piggins, but he was understandably put out to have his house guest ogling his wife over the dinner table. So he decided to test Ixion. He transformed a cloud to look exactly like Hera. A cloud? You mean like a rain cloud in the sky? Asked Derek. Well, I imagine it was a beautiful white fluffy cloud, said Nanny Piggins. Grey isn't as flattering. But it was a cloud, although when he transformed the cloud, it became a cloud nymph. Not another nymph, said Michael. So we've had wood nymphs, sea nymphs, tree nymphs, mountain nymphs, and now there are cloud nymphs? Yes, in the ancient Greek story days, these incredibly beautiful women were singing and dancing and frolicking all about the place in nature. So anyway, this cloud nymph was called Nephele, and she was a dead ringer for Hera. Zeus asked her to sit in the living room on Mount Olympus, and they waited for Ixion to walk by. She didn't have long to wait. As soon as Ixion entered the room, boom! He couldn't resist. As soon as he saw the cloud nymph, who looked exactly like Hera, Ixion couldn't control himself. He launched himself at Nephele and started smothering her with kisses. Zeus leapt out from behind the curtains, where he'd been hiding the whole time, and denounced Ixion. I thought you were my friend, said Zeus. I am. I didn't mean to do it. It's just that I tripped, and my lips landed on her several times in quick succession, claimed Ixion. What a rotter, said Samantha. I don't believe you, said Zeus. I don't believe it. I'm on Zeus's side with this one, said Samantha. And as we know, Zeus was a god of action. He threw Ixion out of Mount Olympus and blasted him with a thunderbolt. Kaboom! Good, said Samantha. Then he ordered that Ixion was tied to a winged fiery... Yep, sorry, that just sounded crazy, but I'm just double checking. I was right. He tied Ixion to a winged fiery wheel that was constantly spinning, and that wheel was set in the sky to roll across the heavens for all eternity. Wow, that is weirdly specific, said Derek. Yes, Zeus had a very imaginative, cruel streak, agreed Nanny Piggins. What happened to Nephele? Asked Samantha. Well, she was a bit shaken up by the whole thing, said Nanny Piggins. To be created in the image of a god and assaulted by a king all on the same day was a lot to process. Zeus sent her down to earth to marry another king, King Athamas of Boeotia. Couldn't she just stay single for a while? Asked Samantha. Have a break from romance? I'm afraid it's a dominant theme in all the stories from the old and ancient and even modern story days. No storyteller can conceive of a woman not wanting to get married. I don't understand it myself. I receive several marriage proposals most weeks, sometimes several times a week, sometimes several times a day. The children nodded. The retired army colonel who lived around the corner and was hopelessly in love with Nanny Piggins proposed to her most weeks. That was before all the other men who fell hopelessly in love with her at first started proposing as well. So the children knew it was a constant burden she bravely had to endure. I've never yet succumbed, said Nanny Piggins, but I am lucky to have a very meaningful calling. You think being a nanny is a meaningful calling? Asked Michael. That made him proud, that Nanny Piggins cared so much about them. Well, I was actually thinking about my calling to eat as much chocolate as pigginly possible every single day, but looking after you three is important as well. Medusa was single, Michael pointed out. Yes, that was one of the upsides of being a hideous Gorgon, agreed Nanny Piggins. You weren't expected to get married, so you could focus more on your career. Is turning men into stone really a career? Asked Derek. Maybe not, but I imagine it was a very fun hobby, said Nanny Piggins. I'm sure we can all think of someone who we would like to turn to stone. They all paused for a moment to imagine that. Suffice it to say, there were I'm sure you can all pause. I know I was pausing in that moment, which is why I stumbled. Why don't you all pause to think of someone you would like to turn to stone if you had that power? Yes, I might go back in time and turn my maths teacher into stone. Suffice it to say, there were 3 mathematics teachers at their school who were very lucky that the 3 green children did not have that power. So Nephele married Athamas and lived happily ever after. Oh, sorry, I did the wrong voice. This is something I commonly do when I'm reading. I thought that was a Nanny Piggins line. It's a Samantha line. So Nephele married Athamas and lived happily ever after? Asked Samantha. Goodness, no, said Nanny Piggins. This is the ancient Greek story days. No one ever ends up happily ever after. Athamas and Nephele did get married, and they had twins, a boy called Phrixus and a girl called Helle. Nice, said Samantha. Then Athamas fell in love with Princess Ino of Thebes, said Nanny Piggins. What? He was married to a cloud nymph who looked exactly like Hera, the most beautiful of all the gods, said Samantha. And everyone likes nymphs because all they do is sing and dance and frolic, said Michael. Yes, that's true, said Nanny Piggins. So was Ino a nymph too? Asked Derek. No, she was just a smoking hot princess, said Nanny Piggins. Wow, said Samantha. I thought Zeus was bad, but Ixion and Athamas are actually making him look good. So Athamas cast off Nephele and married Ino, said Nanny Piggins. But Ino did not like her stepchildren. Didn't Nephele get custody? Asked Samantha. No, she went back to being a cloud, said Nanny Piggins. And the children were humans, not clouds, and they couldn't survive in the sky at incredibly high altitudes, so she didn't get joint custody. That is so sad, said Michael. I'm not surprised she went back to being a cloud, said Samantha, after all those relationships. Now, Ino may have been beautiful, but she was a really bad stepmother. She hated Phrixus and Helle with every fibre of her body. Once she had her own children with Athamas, she wanted to get rid of Phrixus and Helle, get them out of the way, so her children would be next in line to the throne. She didn't kill Phrixus and Helle, did she? Asked Samantha. No, of course not, said Nanny Piggins. Thank goodness, said Samantha. She tricked her husband into killing them, said Nanny Piggins. How did she do that? Asked Derek. Well, you've got to understand, there was no processed food back in the ancient Greek story days. There were no refrigerators, nothing was freeze-dried, there was no way to store food, and the chocolate bar had not been invented yet. If crops didn't grow, then people starved, and starving people are always unhappy. So Ino decided to use this to her advantage. All the seed that was to be planted in the fields was kept in a safe place in the palace. So Ino snuck in, took all that seed, and roasted it in an oven. Huh? Why did she do that? Asked Michael. Well, you see, seeds are living things. They're like tiny sleeping plants, explained Nanny Piggins. If you roast them, they'll look the same, but the high temperature will kill the seed. So when the farmers plant the seeds, none of them grew. They were devastated. There was no food for the rest of the year. It never occurred to the farmers that the Queen herself had gone cocoa bananas and sabotaged an entire nation's food supply. They assumed they'd all done something wrong to make the gods offended. So they pleaded with King Athamas to do something. Athamas knew nothing about seed germination because science hadn't been invented yet. So he sent messengers to the smartest person in the land, the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle was a priestess who made divine prophecies. She was basically like an advice columnist, only way more dramatic, and you had to walk a long way to see her. Anyway, Ina got hold of the messages, and she bribed them not to bother going all the way to Delphi to see the oracle. They just hid in a cave for a couple of days, then came back and told the king, "Oh, King Athamas, the oracle totally said that to make the crops grow again, and to save everyone from starvation, you must sacrifice your own children to the gods." "What?" cried King Athamas. Ino kicked the messenger in the shins, reminding him that they had not given the whole message. But only Phrixus and Helle, the children from your first marriage. You don't have to sacrifice your children from your current marriage, because they're so cool and the gods really love them." "That's nuts," exclaimed Samantha. "That's what Athamas said Nanny Piggins. But the situation was so dire, and his people were starving, and everyone pleaded with him to do it. And so everyone pleaded with him to do what the oracle had advised, and Athamas could not fail his people. So reluctantly, King Athamas agreed to sacrifice the twins. "Worst dad ever," said Michael. "Even our dad would never do that," said Derek. "King Athamas had a sacrificial altar built," said Nanny Piggins. "I think he was just delaying. You know how tradies can take forever with rain delays and public holidays. But eventually the carpenters and the stonemasons built the altar, and Athamas couldn't put it off any more. The twins had to be sacrificed. His young children were brought out to the altar, and everyone in the city came to watch. They wanted to make sure the king actually did it so that the crops would grow again." "That's morbid," said Samantha. Athamas raised up his mighty sword ready to strike when a beautiful golden pig appeared in the sky. "A flying pig?" asked Michael. "Yes, a golden flying pig," said Nanny Piggins. "Don't you mean a flying ram?" said Derek. "Didn't the golden fleece come from a sheep?" "No, that's what everyone thinks, but because that's what the historians wrote down," said Nanny Piggins. "But it doesn't make any sense, does it? Sheep can't fly. The children did want to point out that pigs couldn't fly either, but Nanny Piggins was a flying pig, so they realised that argument would not go far. Nephili, their mother, had sent the pig. Being a cloud nymph, she could control all skyborn flying things. She could control all skyborn fluffy things. "But pigs don't have fleeces," said Derek. "This one did," said Nanny Piggins. "She was a spectacular, blonde, long-haired pig, and her name was Chrysomalos Piggins." "Piggins? She was a relative of yours!" exclaimed Michael. "Well, she was a spectacularly beautiful golden flying pig who saved 2 innocent children from certain death. So, of course, she was a Piggins." Chrysomalos, or Chrissy as we call her in the family, swooped down and landed in front of Phrixus and Helle. "Hop on," she cried. "She could talk as well," said Michael. "Chrissy could do everything," said Nanny Piggins. The children didn't need to be told twice. Normally, they may have been reluctant to jump on a flying, talking pig to whom they'd not been formally introduced, but their father was about to kill them with a sword, so they were open-minded to any alternative. They hopped on the flying pig, and she took off into the sky. "Hooray!" cried Boris. "So they did all live happily ever after?" asked Michael. "Not quite," said Nanny Piggins. "They were flying to Colchis." Sorry, I'm just remembering. Is that the correct pronunciation? I should adjust this too. Is that the correct pronunciation? Colchis or Colchis? I can't remember. I think it's Colchis. They were flying to Colchis, a city on the far side of the Black Sea. Nephilim knew the children would be safe there because in the ancient Greek story days, there was an eastern edge of the world. And sorry. Nephilim knew they would be safe there because in the ancient Greek story days, Colchis was the eastern edge of the world. But that meant it was a long flight. And there were no in-flight movies or meals to amuse the passengers, nor were there any seat belts to hold them on. "Oh dear," said Samantha, "I don't like where this is going." They were just about to fly over a narrow strip of water that linked the Mediterranean to the Black Sea when Hele fell asleep. She lost her grip on Chrissy's fleece and dropped down into the waves below. "No," exclaimed Samantha. "That's awful," wailed Boris. "It was a terrible tragedy," said Nanny Piggins. "From that day forth, the sea was named Hele, so the tragedy would never be forgotten. It eventually became known as the Hellespont, which meant the Sea of Hele. And even today, it's still named after her. It's called the Dardanelles, or Dardanelles." "That poor girl," said Michael. "Don't worry. She was fine. She just faked her death. The Hellespont is only a kilometre across at... Oh, here's another one that's hard to pronounce. It's only a kilometre across at Canocalque, and Hele just swam ashore. She found a lovely bakery and spent the rest of her life avoiding kings with big swords. Phrixus flew on to Colchis, where the nice king promised to keep him safe. To thank the gods for saving him, although really it had been Nephili who had saved him, so the gods didn't really deserve the credit, Phrixus sacrificed the golden flying pig and gave her fleece to the king of Colchis. "What? After Chrysomelis saved his life, Phrixus repaid her by sacrificing her to the gods?" asked Samantha. "No, not really," said Nanny Piggins. "Phrixus was a small boy, and Chrysomelis was a magical golden flying pig. She wasn't going to stand for that. Literally, if he tried anything, she would have just flown off. Instead, she taught Phrixus she taught Phrixus how to bake a golden sheet cake, which is a very large flat cake, perfect for sharing with lots of people, and a much nicer thank you gift to give a king. Phrixus gave the golden sheet cake to the king of Colchis, and the king thought the cake was so beautiful that he didn't eat it. He hung it in a tree in his garden where it would be guarded by a dragon who never sleeps. And so Phrixus lived a long and happy life in Colchis, where he had 4 sons, and that is the beginning of the story. "Don't you mean that's the end of the story?" asked Derek. "Oh no, that's the beginning of the story of Jason and the Argonauts," said Nanny Piggins. "But now I'm hungry for golden sheet cake. I'll tell you the story about Jason another time." So they all rushed off to the kitchen to bake. The end. All right, so that's one chapter from this book. And to demonstrate what the fun facts are like, so this is the fun fact that comes after this story. Fun fact. If only there had been a seatbelt on the back of that flying pig, Hele might still be alive today. Well, of course she wouldn't, because she'd be 3,000 years old, but she would have survived the flight to Colchis. The seatbelt was actually invented for flying. It wasn't invented for cars. It was invented in the 1800s by an engineer called George Cayley, who used the seatbelt in his glider. He was a glider pilot. So the seatbelt wasn't adapted for cars until the 1950s. So that's where seatbelts come from. All right, so that's it. That's a reading from this book. Okay. There's more people saying hello, hello, hello. Thank you all for joining me for the podcast. Now, so we've had the introduction where I explain where the book comes from. We've had a reading. Now, the next thing I always do at my book launches is I've just realized this camera is really off center and you're getting a really good view. Not the Instagram one, because I'm live stream on 2 different sources at once, but everyone here watching this one, they've got a really good view of all my Christmas wrapping paper right there. And just above the Christmas wrapping paper, you can see there's like a frame drawing that's a bit skew-if. That's actually Dan Santat, who illustrated the American editions of Nanny Piggins. He personally posted that to me. It's his, I'm going to get it and show it to you. He gave this to me. It's a gift from him. It's a drawing from the first ever Nanny Piggins book. So over 10 years ago, like 15 years ago, he did that for me. That's his version of Nanny Piggins. And that's from one of the stories in the first Nanny Piggins book when she becomes a portrait artist. So, yeah. So, yeah, it's actually kind of nice. One thing, like, it's a shame you don't get to meet me in person. Hang on, I don't want to break this. But one thing about doing this online book launch means that you get to come to my office, like this office. I mean, you can't see much. You can see all my bookcases behind me and posters because I have them up there for when I do Zooms and stuff. You can see there's my ukulele. Because if you come to a live show, I often play this. I bought this one for my New Zealand tour because I play a ukulele. I'm not actually any good at playing a ukulele, but I can play it a bit because you can fit one in a suitcase. So when you're traveling around doing an author tour, it's much easier to carry than my big guitar, which I also bring for my live shows. Like if you ever come to a Christmas show, you'll see me play this one. That's my big guitar, and I've got an electric guitar and stuff. So that's one of the advantages about doing this book launch here online on Livestream is that you can come to my office. This is the room where I've written every book I've written since I wrote. We moved here while I was writing the last Nanny Piggins book, Nanny Piggins Guide to Conquering Christmas. I was writing that when we moved here. So I wrote the second half of it here in this house. So every book I've written since then, I wrote in this room. So all the Friday Barnes books, all the Pesky Kids books, every episode of the podcast was recorded here in this room. The light, you can see it's sort of bright. That's shining off. There's a window right behind the cameras. And that's where I look out. If you listen to the podcast, I often talk about Windsor Carriby Shire Council's mowing the field out there. So yeah, this is where I've created all these worlds. I've come up with all these ideas in this room. So I think I worked it out last night. I've written 33 books and I was writing my 9th book when I moved here. So yeah, 24 books I've written in this room and 350 something episodes of the podcast I've recorded here in this room. So that's one of the nice things about you being able to come to the launch is you can actually see my space. Oh, someone I should introduce you to is Henry the dog. If you listen, you may have heard Henry. He's been here for every single podcast recording. You don't often hear him. Sometimes he scratches on the door if he's locked out because when he hears me talking, he likes to be in the room with me. So he's kind of asleep at the moment. So I'm going to go over and grab him, bring him over to show you. Henry, come and meet everyone at the book launch. He is the sweetest sausage. He's a cavoodle. He's a miniature cavoodle. So miniature, you would think means he's a tiny cavoodle, but it actually means he's larger than most cavoodles. He looks a bit sleepy. He's 9 years old now, so he's getting on a little bit. He's very fluffy, and he smells quite good today because I washed him the other day. So he appears in the Tall Tales with Tammy and Mum stories as Stanley. But he's such a good boy. You are, aren't you? He's very good. It's very nice about being an author is you get to work from home. You get to spend a lot of time with your dog and your children, which is also good. All right. Do you want to go back on the bed or do you want to sit there on my lap? He used to get really scared in COVID. I would do author talks at schools. And when I do author talks at schools, I have a trumpet. It didn't even occur to me to blast my trumpet for this, but it used to terrify him, me blasting a trumpet inside my office. And then I'd be yelling at the computer doing a presentation and he had no idea what I was doing. He must have thought I was having some sort of fit because I'd blast this really loud noise and then I'd start talking to everyone online and he must have had no idea what was going on. But anyway, he's used to it now and he usually just sits quite quietly. I'm going to pop you back on the bed so I can have my hands free. Oh yeah, you're moaning. Okay. So these are the questions I got from kids and some adults, actually. So this is pretty cool. So Adele has sent me a question. She's asked, where do you get the ideas for the adaptations of epically good Greek myths? Also, who are the authors that of the books you read to get the ideas for the books also? Anyway. So she wants to know where I get the ideas for the epically Greek myths and what books I read. Well, for changing the Greek myths, obviously, it's Nanny Piggins telling them, and it's fun when she makes one of the characters her relatives. That's like a fun thing to do. And that's kind of a device I've used. I use in Nanny Piggins books even before I was doing the podcast. The changes I usually make is because it's for children. And if you go back and read the original stories of the Greek myths, some of them are really we joke about the violence and it's fun with like the swords and Medusa and that. But some of them are really quite unpleasantly violent. So I try and change those and usually make it about cake, like when, like the Minotaur, I think gets a really hard time because he's a monster and everyone's trying to kill him. And you think, well, he's had a really hard life locked in the labyrinth. So I didn't really want to kill the Minotaur. So I had in my story that Nanny Piggins instead offers him cake and he realizes it tastes much better than people. So it's just a nicer way of doing it. So that's often so anything to substitute like those horrible things, I usually try and substitute in cake or lollies or chocolate as the motivation. So that's where I get the ideas for changes. And then just the Nanny Piggins voice and her ideas and what she thinks is reasonable. That just is constantly in my mind. So I don't really have to work at coming up with those ideas. So the books that I read, that's a good question. Okay, so I showed you the one. This is an old copy. If you want to get a copy of the ancient Greek myths, you can pick them up. Like this, go to secondhand bookshops, and this you'll find lots because lots of kids get given them, and then they get older and they give them to secondhand bookshops. So this one, as I say, is by Walsh, but this one is actually interesting. See, the ancient Greek stories were a lot of what our versions, they get translated over and over again through history. So they get translated by the Romans. So this one, it says it's Tales of the Greek Heroes, but it's obviously been translated from Latin editions because they talk about Ulysses instead of Odysseus. Like the Greek name is Odysseus, and Minerva is a Roman god, the goddess. If you know Harry Potter, Minerva McGonagall, Professor McGonagall, her first name, she's named after the Roman goddess for wisdom, Minerva. So so that's that one. The one I use a lot is this one. It's the key thing to know is, oh, that's King Arthur. What am I talking about? This one. It's the same author. That's why I got confused. So this is Tales of Greek Heroes. This might be reversed by Roger Lancelin Green. So, and this is by Puffin. So you can get this now in bookstores in Australia and all around the world. It's a Puffin classic. But the edition changed. It looks different all the time. So you just need to go Roger Lancelin Green, Tales of the Greek Heroes. This book has been around for decades, absolutely decades. So when was it first published? 1958. So like 60 odd years this book has been around. And this is a great kids version of the Greek myths. But there's an edition right now in Australia, it's sort of like yellow hardback with like a cloth cover. And it's got this awesome picture of Medusa on the cover. They've literally got it in the window of the bookshop Barrel in my hometown. And I saw it when I was touring QBD bookshops in Western Sydney yesterday. So it's obviously a new release. So it's got the same name, Tales of the Greek Heroes, and the same author, but the cover looks totally different. But if you look Puffin, Tales of the Greek Heroes, Roger Lancelin Green, that's a great place to start for kids. He also wrote this one on King Arthur, so the King Arthur stories I got from there. And I'm currently doing all the Odysseus stories on the podcast. So this isn't Roger Lancelin Green, but it's another Puffin edition of the Odyssey. But I always try and use multiple sources because for a variety of reasons, like I want to have my own take on it. And all these historians, like Roger Lancelin Green, he's right in the 1950s. He's a man, like he's got his own perspective of what makes his retelling good. And I like to go back and use some older sources as well, so it's just so I have more ideas to draw on, so that when I'm coming up with my like Piggins, fabulous talking pigs view of it, I can have more material to work with. So I often go to Wikipedia and look things up. There's a lot of websites online, like academic websites that have tellings of Greek myths. People often write to me and say, you tell these pig versions, where can I get a version of the proper Greek myths? And I always say, well, there isn't really a proper version. Like probably the Roger Lancelin Green is about as close as you're going to get that's appropriate for children. But the thing is, even in ancient Greek story times, when these stories were first written down, and then, as I said, they were written down again translated into Latin by Romans 2,000 years ago. So even 2,500 years ago when they wrote them down in ancient Greece, and 2,000 years ago when they wrote them down in ancient Rome, they were already thousands of years old at that stage, and they would have been told and retold by all different storytellers. So there are lots of different ancient versions. If you ever, like sometimes authors try and write like a family tree of all of the Greek gods, and when they do that, it never makes sense because all the different ancient storytellers of the ancient Greek myths, they have different ideas. There was no Wikipedia for them all to write it down together. They have different ideas, and they get the chronologies all different, so it doesn't make sense. So there isn't a true version. There's lots of versions. So I don't feel bad about mixing it up and having my own version and bringing in other things. That's what has always happened to these stories throughout history. They have been retold through the prism of the people of the time that they are telling them. So they're the ancient Greek ones. I thought while we're here, I'd show you some of the other books that I read for the podcast, because I read a lot. So I read, this is a graphic novel version of the Iliad, the 1001 Arabian Nights. I've got this beautiful Barnes & Noble edition that I really like working with. And Barnes & Noble also did a really nice edition. This is a French fairy tale book, the Blue Fairy Tales. A lot of the classic fairy tales that you know, the versions you've read would have been inspired by the versions in this book. This was like one of the first books, French books, I want to say 19th century, where things like Cinderella and things like that would have been written down. And then all the versions since would have been inspired by that one. And then what else have I got here? I've been doing a lot of, I've done a couple of Irish fairy tales recently, because people asked for Irish fairy tales, and I knew they were great fairy tales. Like the whole idea of fairies comes from Ireland, but I've really struggled to find a good book. So I got this one, A Treasury of Irish Fairy and Folk Tales, but it's kind of, they don't work. To do a bedtime story, you need a story to sort of come full circle, because I do actually want you to be able to go to sleep. And so you need the story to sort of end with a nice conclusion. And some some Irish fairy tales are kind of dark, but this is a great book that I highly recommend. Maybe it didn't really work out for me being able to use it for the podcast, but the coolest thing about, like, the stories are great, but it's got this really, really interesting introduction by Yeats, the poet. So anyway, I really enjoyed reading that one. Yeah, Yeats, the poet, wrote the introduction, and he's got some really interesting ideas about why Irish fairy tales are so important. Then when I started researching new folk tales, of course, the first thing I went to was a collection of Grimm's fairy tales, classic. Like Frozen comes from the Ice Queen. What else is in Grimm's fairy tales? Rumpelstiltskin, lots of the German folk tales. So there's like 250 fairy tales in this book. So you might, like, I thought, I'll just work my way through this book. You can't, because a lot of them are very similar, and a lot of them you just cannot do. They're not appropriate anymore. I'd be cancelled if I did them. But this is a really interesting book to read, and these editions by the Pantheon editions of folk tales are really, really good editions. So I've actually got a couple of other ones. This is the Pantheon book of favourite folk tales from around the world. There's some interesting African ones there. I haven't done them yet because problem with some cultures, the way they structure stories isn't so much of a circular thing. So it's not that I won't do them. It's just I haven't figured out how to do them and work them into a bedtime story that comes around and concludes nicely. I've also got this Chinese myths and folktales book. And again, I haven't done any from this one yet. I've done some Chinese stories, but not from this one yet, because a lot of these are like ghost stories, and they would freak you out. You wouldn't go to sleep if I did those. But I'm researching all the time. And that's the problem with research, is like you can read a whole book and then realize, I can't use those stories. So I've promised to do some stories from Ramayana. So that's coming up. I've been working through that, and I have done some from the story of like the chessboard and the rice, Indian classic stories, and Korean kids stories. So there's all these different things that I'm reading all the time, and of course, Aesop's fables. Classic Aesop's fables. Aesop's fables are actually really hard to adapt for the podcast because they're really, really, really short. So to make it into a 15-minute story, you have to do a lot of padding. Okay, well, that took me a long time to answer that one question. I've got heaps more books. Like I really want to do the Just So stories by Rudyard Kipling, but I just haven't figured out how I'm going to do them yet because they're so good. I don't want to change them. Anyway, so I'm always reading lots and lots of books, and for every book I read, for every like 3 or 4 books I read, I can probably only use like a third of one of the books. There's a lot of research to get the stories that work. But anyway, so that's what I read. Okay, this next one is from Maeve, and she has asked, where are Nanny Piggins and Friday Barnes set? And her second question is, will you do an Easter story told by Nanny Piggins on your podcast? Okay, so first question, where are they set? I get asked this a lot. So as I said at the beginning, I was a television writer for 10 years before I became an author. And when I was a television writer, I wrote animation, and you never tell the audience where the show is set because you want everyone to think it's set in their country. Because when you write television animation, it will be shown all around the world. Like I worked on shows that were shown in Canada, Malaysia, France, Germany, Italy, and Ireland, Switzerland, all these countries, the same show, and they just revoice it. So I was trained to never mention what country I set something in. So I'm sort of vague about it on purpose because I always assumed my book would be translated and into lots of countries. And it kind of works. Like it hasn't actually gone to all that many countries, but in America and New Zealand, kids read it and they do sometimes think, oh, it's set in my country. And that's intentional. So you can project yourself onto it. I wanted people to be able to project their own lives onto it. And now Maeve's asked, will I ever do an Easter story as told by Nanny Piggins? Okay, now, there's some problems with this. First of all, I have done a Nanny Piggins Easter story. I've done Nanny Piggins and the Ghosts of Easter. You might have to go back into the archives for that, but I think I did that in the first couple of years. It's a chapter from one of the books. It's Nanny Piggins and the Ghosts of Easter, where 3 ghosts come and tell her, show her why it's so bad that she behaves badly every Easter. Easter is a problem. Like I know I do heaps of Christmas stories and I've done a Hanukkah story, but you have to be very, very careful when you talk about religion, and particularly Easter, because Easter is a sad holiday for people who are Christian. It's not something to be taken lightly or disrespectfully. So Christmas, you can have a lot of fun with. There's Santa, and I know I do the Nativity, but the birth of Jesus is a joyous story. And I mean, Hanukkah, the story of Hanukkah is a bit of a mixed bag, but it's got a happy ending for the Maccabees anyway. So you've got to be very careful. I'm not saying I will never do a story about Easter and where it comes from, but I probably won't because I don't want to upset anyone. But I might do another Easter story about Easter eggs and the Easter bunny. That's fine. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the answer to that. Some of these answers, they're not really kid answers, they're adult answers, but I'm a big believer in being honest with you. And that's the thoughts going through my head. I just want to be careful if I do that one. Okay, next one from Maya. She's asking, are there going to be any more new books of Nanny Piggins or Friday Barnes? Well, in a way, this is a Nanny Piggins book because she is narrating all the stories. I wouldn't rule out a Nanny Piggins book. It kind of depends. I get commissioned to do new books based on how well the other books do. So the last book I had that came out was Nanny Piggins and the Origin Story. If that sells well, they might ask me to do another one. But there are now 10 Nanny Piggins books plus 4 compilations of her telling stories. So that's 14 books. That's a lot. So I doubt there's going to be another Nanny Piggins novel, but you know, I'm 49. I'm going to be writing for another 30 years. There could well be. All right. Actually, I'll probably only be writing for another 20 years because I don't think I could still do this when I'm 80. Anyway. Maybe not Nanny Piggins, but there's definitely going to be more Friday Barnes. And there might be more Nanny Piggins short story collections, that's for sure. And then I'm hoping that if the Greek Myths book does well, to be able to do a book of the Odysseus stories. Friday Barnes, definitely. There's a new Friday Barnes coming out in June. It's called Friday Barnes in Plain Sight, and it's set in New York. If you follow me on Instagram, you know I went to New York with my mum. That's when I went to Canada back in April. And yeah, so that's really, really fun. I think Friday Barnes fans will love that. There's a lot of Ian, there's a lot of Binky, there's a lot of Ingrid. It's good fun. And I have been commissioned to write a 14th book. I have no idea what's going to happen in that one. It might be set in Singapore. I'm not sure. I've got a couple of different ideas. And then they are talking to me about doing a Friday Barnes Christmas short story collection. So they're talking about that. I haven't signed to do that yet. So there's one more coming out in June. There's definitely going to be one come out the following June or sometime in 2026. And there may very well be a Christmas book at the end of 2026. We'll see. Okay, what else has Maya asked, or Maya? She's asked about epically good Greek myths. And is it basically Greek myths retold by Nanny Piggins? Yes, it is. That's what it is. And she's asked, will there be any fairy tales books told by Nanny Piggins? Well, there kind of already are. Shockingly Good Stories, Astonishingly Good Stories, and Bedtime Stories with R.S. Spratt all have fairy tales told by Nanny Piggins. So if that's what you're after, check them out. They're really good books. Okay, 2 more people have written with questions. The Davenport family from California. They've written, they're wondering if I'm going to narrate any more audiobooks in the Nanny Piggins series. So I've done 6 of the Nanny Piggins books. I always remember them by the color of their cover. So number 6 was Pursuit of Justice. That's the red one. So that's the one I've done most recently. And I've also done Nanny Piggins' origin story. So there's books 7, 8, and 9 left to go. So I will do those 3 books. I'm not sure when. The next audiobook I'm going in to record is the next Friday Barnes book, which is Friday Barnes 13, In Plain Sight. They've also asked, will the Nanny Piggins books cover all 14 girls across the titles? I think you mean all the Nanny Piggins sisters. So there are 8 Nanny Piggins books, then there's the Christmas special, then there's the origin story. So when I started out, I honestly thought the idea of Nanny Piggins was so good, I would be writing a Nanny Piggins book every year for the rest of my life. I thought there was no way that everyone from the entire world would not fall in love with her and she would become a huge epic thing like Paddington Bear, and that would be the whole rest of my life would be writing Nanny Piggins. That's what I thought would happen because I think she's such a wonderful character. So I thought I would end up writing 37 books. Obviously everyone else thought I was delusional, including my publisher. So I tried to blackmail them into letting me write at least 14 by announcing to all my fans that it was a 14ology, because there was an author called Douglas Adams, and he wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and he always used to refer to it as a trilogy, but he wrote 5 books. So he always used to say it was the 5th book in the trilogy, and I always thought that was very funny. So I thought I would write a 14ology. So I went around telling everyone I was going to write a 14ology and that there would be 1 book for each of the sisters. And then I put in a brother as well. But then I think it was after book 5, they asked me, the 5th book of Nanny Piggins, they asked me to stop writing Nanny Piggins books and write something else. And I said no, because I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, the one that Tammy's based on. And it was just horrifying to me because I was working on all these television shows as well. I was working very, very, very hard, long hours. I had a 3-year-old and I was about to have another baby. And the idea of having to come up with a concept and write a new series from scratch was just horrifying. It's like, I can't do that. I can't take that on as well. I said, I can keep writing Nanny Piggins, but I can't come up with a new concept. And they were all like, oh, okay, well then we'll commission a couple more Nanny Piggins. So they commissioned a couple more, but they weren't really supporting them with marketing or anything. So I was writing them, but they weren't selling. So I got to book 8 and they sort of said again, maybe you could write something else. And I'm like, okay, because they weren't getting pushed into shops. So it's like, there's no point me writing them if they're not selling. So I had to wrap it up. But then some other author let them down with a Christmas book. So they came back to me and said, can you just do 1 more? Can you do a Christmas special? You've got 8 weeks to write it. And I'm like, okay. But sort of worked out that the first 8 books had a different Nanny Piggins sister in each book. And then I had to stop, not at a time of my choosing. But then I got the Christmas book. So in the Christmas book, I jam all the sisters in. They all turn up on Boxing Day, which if you're not from Australia, New Zealand or England, Boxing Day is the day after Christmas. So in that book, all the sisters that didn't get mentioned in the previous books, they all turn up on Boxing Day in the 9th book. And then all the sisters are again in origin story. So yes, I did at one stage intend to have 14 books with each of the different Nanny Piggins sisters. But that sort of, just from the economics of being an author, fell by the wayside. The weird thing is, publishing is very set up so that a book comes out, and if it does really well, everyone's really happy. But the thing with my books is, my books come out and they do okay, and everyone's like, oh, that wasn't quite as good as we thought. But then my books keep selling year and year after year. So now all those books have sold incredibly well, but it took years. They're slow burners. So ultimately, all the books ended up being huge bestsellers. But in the minds of the publishers, when they came out, that's not the way they're perceived. So that sort of dogged me through my career with that's how, in America, the books, they only published 3 Nanny Piggins. They only published 4 Friday Barnes, because it's hard to explain to people, oh, just be patient. Over the course of the years, they will sell a lot, because people in publishing come and go and they want more instant gratification. So it's kind of complicated to do with lots of business, boring things. Okay, but that's that question. Okay, one more person asked questions. Louis has asked, he's got 3 questions. Do you have any advice for young writers? I'm actually a terrible person to ask for advice because I'm a really disorganized mind. I like very scattergun, and I'm very truthful, which probably isn't really you want to encourage children, and there's a lot. It's hard work. And my story is the opposite to a lot of writers. Like, I fell into this by accident almost. I got a job and I've been a writer ever since. Like, I literally turned up to do work experience, to work behind the scenes, behind the cameras on a television show. And there was none of the crew there that day. So I sat with the writers and I was offered a job at the end of the week. And I have been a writer ever since. So I haven't got the stories about what work you need to do to get to where you're going. I would say what helps me now, like I was showing you all my books, I love learning new things and I'm endlessly curious about obscure little things. I think, the more you can learn, like read the paper, read books, just pay attention to the world around you, take an interest in people, ask follow-up questions. Older people are fascinating when you start talking to them and finding out what they've done in their life. All people are fascinating when you start talking to them and finding out their attitudes and what they've done in their life. So just pay attention and read. And I didn't write my first book till I was like 32. So don't be in a rush. You have to have something to say that is worth capturing people's attention. But also writing books, writing anything is storytelling. So start thinking about everything in terms of storytelling. If you want some more specific advice, I'd recommend go to my website, raspratt.com. There's things for teachers is one of the tabs, and there's a video there on how to do story structure. It's like an 11-minute video where I explain how to structure a story. Like I was saying, you need a story to come full circle. And so it's satisfying and you can you'll have that calm at the end and be able to go to sleep. Watch that. That's very helpful. And there's also I've got like a zine you can print out. It's just got the most basic tips, but they are actually like the very simple things like who is your hero? What is their problem? Like these basic questions you need to ask yourself. It's amazing how many writers don't ask themselves these simple questions before they embark on writing a story. But if you ask yourself these simple questions and focus on them, it will improve your storytelling. So look up those resources on my website, raspratt.com, under the Things for Teachers tab. Okay, second question is, are you going to write another Nanny Piggins book? Oh, we've answered that. Probably. I said probably not, but realistically, I'm sitting here thinking about it. The chance of me not writing another Nanny Piggins book, I can't imagine it. Oh, Louis must be from Brisbane. He's also said, please do another Brisbane show. I think I went to Queensland. Well, I know it. I went to Queensland 6 times last year, so I'm sure I will be back. I'm not doing as much travel this year because my daughter is doing the HSC, the final year of high school. So I promised her not to be away from home as much. I did so much travel over the last 2 years, and it's kind of unfair on my kids to be away from home that much. So I've promised her to stay closer to home this year. So I don't think I'm going to Brisbane this year. That said, I am going to the Whitsundays and I'm going to Bellingen for festivals, but I'm sure I'll be back in Brisbane at some stage next year. Probably around book week. And even if I'm not doing a theatre show, I'll probably do an in-store event. So I'm sure I'll do some sort of public event in Brisbane next year. Also, anyone in Brisbane or Southeast Queensland or Northern New South Wales, I just want to say, I hope you're all safe and well with the cyclone and the terrible weather you're having up there. Stay safe. It floods here where I live, like literally out the window gets flooded, and it gets very dangerous. So floodwater is dangerous. Stay safe. Never walk into moving floodwater. Never drive your car into moving floodwater. I can say that from experience. It's just can be very dangerous. So I hope you're all safe and well up there. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. All your lovely messages have been, I like the people saying that my dog is adorable. I totally agree. He's very fluffy at the moment, yes, because I cleaned him the other day. He's gone back to sleep already. Okay, so I better wrap up because you've got your Saturdays to get on with, and I've been talking for over an hour. So I did promise the rocket. It's designed to shoot 8 meters in the air. And my ceiling is only like 2.5 meters high. Oh, I just banged the microphone. Okay, so let's see if this works. So this will be the big conclusion. So thank you very much for coming and helping me launch Epically Good Greek Myths. If you'd like a signed copy, and if you're in Australia, New Zealand, you can use the link, go to Booktopia. I went down there and signed a whole bunch of copies. If you are overseas and you want like a book plate sticker to stick in front of one of my books, you can go to my Coffee page and you can order one there, and there's a little fee to cover the postage to you. And I'll post that off to you. A lot of people have already done that, so I'll be getting that off to you this week. All right, so that's it for now. And now we'll finish by scaring my dog and totally trashing my office and actually running over my research books with my chair. Okay, here we go. Let's go. So this is to officially launch Epically Good Greek Myths. 3, brace yourself, Henry. Brace yourself. He's woken up. He's licking his lips. He thinks food's coming. He's pretty right. I'm going to have lunch after this. 3, 2, 1. Oh, gosh. Whoa! Happy book launch! Bye! Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.